Who can we share? Who's online this early in the morning? Good morning. If you have a Bible topic or Bible question, feel free to let me know. Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down. You are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. These 6 verses give us a clear understanding of God's omniscience, God's ability to know all things. God has always known all things, knows all things, and will know all things. When we sit down, when we rise up, the psalmist says, most likely David, even when we speak, God knows the words that we're going to speak completely, altogether. The implication is before we even think them or speak them. That kind of knowledge is just, verse 6, David says, it's too wonderful for me. Like, we cannot imagine what it would be like to have such knowledge. And we know that we can't attain it in the fullest sense that God has all this knowledge. Psalm 139, verse 7. If you have a Bible topic or Bible question, feel free to let me know. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. This speaks about God's omnipresence. God is an infinite spiritual being in a number of ways. There's nowhere we can go where we can flee from God. The book of Jonah kind of gives us a silly example of someone who tried to flee from God and what he encountered. In heaven, God is there. In the realm of the dead, God is there. It's what the word hell most likely means. Because some understand hell as an eternal punishment, as absence from God. And there's something to that. There's something about absence of God or the goodness that comes from God. It would be like this life without anything good in it, or far worse. Whether we take wings and fly, whether we're at the bottom of the sea, even there, God should be guiding us. I saw someone ask about, like, what's God's purpose for my life? What's God's plan? Well, no matter where you go, God needs to guide you. God needs to lead you. You need to do God's will and glorify God. You're not going to make a wrong mistake unless you just make a bad judgment call. But let's see. And we could talk about that. If anyone has a Bible topic or Bible question, feel free to let me know. Again, even in darkness, even in night with no light, we can't hide from God. We can't be apart from God or separated from God. It's foolish to think that God, can't see us, or we could hide in darkness. People who understand in modern times we have like second and third shifts. People have to work at night and sleep during the day, but in the past, primarily outside of like, soldiers keeping watch or certain tasks you'd have to do at night, those that go about at night are most likely going about because they don't want people to see what they're doing. And kind of live in a culture now that things are done in broad daylight, but there's no escape from God. And even Paul says in Acts 17, God is not far from any one of us. Verse 13. For you formed my inward parts, you covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed. And in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. How precious are your thoughts to me, O God! How great is the sum of them! If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I awake, I'm still with you. Again, if you're just not joining, you have a Bible topic or Bible question, feel free to let me know. It speaks about God's power. It sort of goes hand in hand with his knowledge, being able to craft like a human being, the complexity of organic life, how God, formed each of us in the womb of our mother, how marvelous it is, how fearfully and wonderfully made we are. The individual cell, the complexity of the molecules, the proteins, and all these things. If you have no concept of what all that entails, then even just the DNA that drives the cell and shapes it and shapes the being from conception on. It's just the power of God coupled with his knowledge. But we say God is omnipotent. God can create anything. We say anything, we think anything that's logically possible. God's one of the silliest and oldest arguments against God is, can God create a boulder so big he can't lift? Well, that'd be a logical contradiction. There's nothing God can't lift, and he can't create something that is paradoxically or logically invalid. We understand God's wisdom and God's strength. We see how he has made things, how he foreknew, and all these things. And it gives us a hint about God, about who he is, his wisdom, his might. So we've seen in Psalm 139, we've seen God's omniscience, his all-knowingness, his omnipresence, the fact that he is everywhere, not far from any one of us. Though ultimately everyone has to repent and turn to the Lord. Like, not being far from God doesn't mean that you're reconciled to God or you're not an enemy of God. Like, that's a separate matter entirely. But because of God's omnipresence, there's a way in which he's not far from any one of us. Like, the truth of God is not far from any one of us. These things can be known, as we've seen just from the complexity of organic life, and that sort of thing. But we close the psalm with God's benevolence. Verse 19. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, you bloodthirsty men. For they speak against you wickedly. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate them, O Lord, who hate you? Do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with a perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Even people who hate God, even people who despise God, or despise what is good, because God is the standard, the measure of good. God desires for all to be saved. God desires for all to, again, turn to him and turn from wickedness. There are those who try to, confuse you about God, try to cast doubt in your mind about the Lord. And, it'd be one thing if they were wicked and kept on their own, but they want to be wicked and they want to destroy the faith of the righteous. And David, cries out, if anyone hates you, God, then I hate them. And it's a perfect and pure hatred. And whether that's justified or not is not really, people argue back and forth about that. Like, we hate evil ideas. We hate, these silly arguments people come up with that don't really hold to being tested. But, even in a world that is so depraved and so wicked because of the love of their sin and love of like the temporary pleasure they get from this earth and this life, these are the people of whom Christ died for. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth in him should have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. Hey, good morning, Arley. Hey, what's going on?
My brother from another mother. What's up, Jim?
Doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm well. I got a good night's sleep, and well, my wife, I apologize, she's still sleeping. But it's been a minute. I just wanted to stop in and say hello, and always good to see your face and hear you dropping some truth.
Absolutely. No, I was walking through Psalm 139. I was trying to look at, because I've preached it before, it talks about God being all-knowing and all-present, and his strength, his omnipotence, and his benevolence. And I've been thinking a lot lately about how we reduce God to like his attributes sometimes, but a majority of the Bible is what God has said and what God has done for us. And I kind of wanted to highlight that. Though we get descriptions of God, we also see, God is creator. He created me. And David draws that distinction toward the end about, the wicked and the righteous. But really, I think there's a bit of, God's love and omnibenevolence there. But Exodus 21:16, someone mentioned in the comments. I'm going to go there, but you can say whatever you want to say for a moment.
Yeah, with Psalms, it's I did a video on here. I don't know if I even captured because you can't, like, we can't put God in a box. But the 3 O's, I kept coming up, also with a 4th O, the benevolence, the omnibenevolence. Like, God is love. God is love. God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. And then I come across this commentary. It said that, is God in hell? And I'm like, that kind of disturbed my spirit. But the way they described it, it said, well, it's not that God is in hell. Hell is in the presence of God. Like, even though that's as far away as you can get from God, it's still on his peripheral. Mm-hmm. And I never thought about it that way. It's like, okay, that's how all-encompassing God is. It's like hell is as far away as you can get, but he knows you're there, and but he is love. He's not going to put you there out of love, but he's also just. That's where that part comes in, because he's judge, jury, executioner, but he loves us. And anyway, and I love the Psalms too. I need to read all of them all the way through, but they're so poetic and beautiful. They like kind of drips off your tongue like honey sometimes when you read it. But I like there at the end though, it says, search me, O God, and know my heart. This is Psalm 139:23. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. So he knows our hearts before we knew it ourselves. And that's basically why we pray, why we study and read, to try to know his heart, even though we can't fully grasp it, right? Is we want to know what his heart is and what his word tells us.
Right. Not very good. Um, so the Exodus 21:16 is uh, a curse against those who kidnap people and try to sell them or find them in hand. And I guess the argument was America is founded on wicked principles such as slavery and that sort of thing, which there are some Christian authors out there that take that kind of view, like David Berceau is one of them. How rebellion against the English crown was never warranted, and it was just a bunch of like criminals that didn't want to pay their taxes, and he kind of leans into the founding fathers a little bit, but so there are actually people that share that opinion, but don't think it's really worth getting into. Or as far as the nation coming to judgment, I mean that's going to happen to any nation, any point in
Absolutely.
history.
Well, when you look at, all right, like Israel, they were in bondage, right? Whenever they were, well, in Babylon, you had the captivity in Babylon, you had the Egyptian captivity. Um, when you look at slavery that way, I mean, it's a little different, I think, than chattel slavery, but because people want to split hairs on that, and they're like, well, why would God allow this? And I'm like, well, that was people. Like, there's still people doing that today. There's trafficking, and I'm trying to be careful with my language because it is TikTok.
Yeah.
But that's still happening today. But that's because men are evil, not God. God cannot be evil. But with slavery and bondage, it's like that's what sin is. You know, when Paul says in Romans 7:24, "O wicked man that I am, who will deliver me from this death?" A preacher had told me once, like in a Bible study, the Romans were cruel, and you probably know this, Jim, already for those listening. They would tie the criminals sometimes to a corpse, and like you think how cruel that is, what that's going to. But you think about sin being tied to that, being chained to a corpse, like that's kind of, I think where he was going with his lesson was that's kind of what sin is. It will rot you away, you know, and the wages of sin is death. So when I think of slavery, like I think of sin immediately in the Bible, personally. But
Yeah. And I think there's a big debate as far as like the future of America. Like, are we going to, as a nation, as a whole, like repent and turn around? And but even in passages like Obadiah, you've got Edom, who, the prophet's calling them to repentance, but eventually they still met their end. Like, America's not going to be around forever. Now, a lot of people think that, some people think the rapture is going to happen, what, in 3 days from now or 2 days from now. So they're not really worried about it. But, as a Christian, if Russia or China, like, takes over our government and, we're in captivity or something like that, I don't think a lot of Christians are prepared to deal with that. And are they going to fight back? Are they going to just, well, as long as we can be Christian, it doesn't really matter. Um, if it's the American government in place, and I don't think enough people think about that. So,
agree. Yeah, well, I mean, not enough. There's not enough Christians that have backbones anymore. Whenever you hear people spouting off false doctrine,
oh yeah,
a lot of them won't even speak up the truth, you know. But for the person in the comments, when Jesus is talking about coming like a thief in the night, that is that's for the unbelievers. Because I'm not saying that the saints know, like those of us that are saved, we're not going to know the day or the hour. But the Scripture says that we don't walk in the darkness anymore; we walk in the light. So the thief in the night, those are the people going to be caught off guard. So those of us that and I don't know, I've never asked you about the rapture, but people do call it the blessed hope. But my blessed hope is Jesus. So I do hold to the rapture, but whether it's pre, mid, or post, like I know that I know where I'm going when I leave this world. But I don't know, but just That's something to think about there south is you're not, if you're saved, you're walking in the light. You're not walking in darkness no more.
Right.
But again, like, you talked about Russia and China. That's a big possibility, brother Jim. you know,
I mean, when the Ukraine stuff was happening, and I'm thinking, oh, is there going to be, is something going to break out? Is there going to be some conflict that we're going to go into, and it's not going to end well, or it might not. I'm not saying one way or the other, but um, if we broach that, if I'm not saying like it's going to be fallout, like nuclear stuff goes off and it's apocalyptic in that sense, but I don't think people have thought about, like, what if this government gets taken over by some foreign power? Is a Christian's responsibility going to be to fight and try to win independence, or is it just going to be, well, as long as we can worship and stay Christian, it doesn't matter what government we're under? And I mean, I know those two powers are primarily. I don't think Russia's like communist anymore. Like, in a sense, I think there's some conflict with religion, but I don't think it's the way it used to be under other leaders. Where China, like, I know people who've been to China, kind of like secret missionaries. They have to email and talk in code, and there are Christians in China. It's just against the law.
right.
Essentially, it's this weird double-edged sword. It's like, it's not against the law, but all these things will happen to you if they find out you're a Christian. So that's worst case scenario. But if I don't know.
Well, also too, you've got those Christians that are, which I don't. I'm fine with nationalism as long as it's inclusive. Um, but like you have some of these like very, and I don't want to get too political, but some people are very right, like extreme, that want to make it like Gilead in The Handmaid's Tale, and and I'm like, well, you know, and I support when I was growing up, like, we had 10 Commandments in the schools, and they took them out, and I'm like, well, in America, you know, and I'm all for that, but then there's going to be other religions that want to put their stuff in there too, right? So I'm like, because we got to think, even though, because we still have that First Amendment, which is great about this country, but Christianity is under attack, and I just wonder, like, because it is a possibility that Russia, China could take over, or that our own government could be co-opted, because there's obviously spies that are here that are infiltrators, So I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know how it's going to shake out, but I know it's going to be, God's going to use it all for His glory.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Handmaid's Tale. I would honestly recommend every Christian either read the book or watch at least some season of that. So, because when we talk about wanting to be a more godly nation, what other people hear is, oh no, they want to bring about Handmaid's Tale. They want women to be second class citizens and slaves. And Handmaid's Tale is this really weird, like, if it wasn't for this like Children of Men style dystopia where birth rates go down like worldwide and no one knows the cause of it, like, it would take an extreme like that for, I think, Handmaid's Tale to be even a reality. And I don't think it's just going to happen like, oh, we want to make laws based on Christian values and morality, and like, at least as far as we can agree on.
Right.
I made this point the other day. Like, you look at both the main parties in America, they agree on 70% of the issues. It's that 30% of some moral issues that they say, well, the other party's demonic, and back and forth. And I know you don't want to get into politics. It's not my main thing either. But
I agree with you. I agree 100%, because, like, Sorry, go ahead and finish your point. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, you're fine. It's a lot, but like I don't think like just having a Republican president, I don't think that's anywhere close to what A Handmaid's Tale is. Like I don't think we're anywhere near what that's actually going to be. And people draw the comparisons about, and I definitely don't want to get into abortion because it's a ethical and political quagmire. But uh, Handmaid's Tale is a very extreme situation. It's a very extreme form of Christian nationalism that I, in a lot of ways I wouldn't say is Christian at all. Uh, there's a lot of Old Testament principles that people cite to justify all this stuff that they're doing in Handmaid's Tale. And if you know that and understand what the New Testament is saying, if you have a pretty solid view of like politics and Christianity and doctrine, then it's not even like that kind of stuff would never even enter your mind. But
Right.
I need people to understand there is the risk of any theocracy. Let's say like a Muslim state, or Sharia law is introduced into America, one way or another. That's something that we're afraid of, but we don't understand why people are afraid of, what we say when we say Christians are. And I'm not saying Christianity is even close to like the Muslim extreme of like the Middle East and people under Sharia law and women can't even drive. You know, it's not even close to like, now some Christians might take it to that extreme. There's some people that really concern me about when they start talking about patriarchy instead of complementarianism. But be that as it may, people need to understand like what people are afraid of. Like I wouldn't want to live in Gilead either. And if you don't know what we're talking about, if you don't understand, then that's why I think people need to at least look into that and understand what's being said. Because
Really, a spoiler alert if you're not seen the show or read the book. When June and Serena actually kind of become, I don't know, because they're still women and they have children. And that's why the whole thing started, like you said a while ago, about the birth rates. And I didn't know this when I first started. My wife watched it, and I thought it was a woman's show. But I was like, wait a minute. There was a coup and all this stuff, and I was like, okay. I know there's language and whatnot, but,
yeah,
so for those of you that don't, there is language. I will say that. But aside from that, the core values, when I first watched it, I didn't know that the birth rate in America is what it is right now. And I said, wait a minute, and like you said a while ago, it would take something that extreme like that to happen. But I don't think our birth rate is nearly what it is in the show right now. But it is noteworthy, because I don't think that we're procreating like we used to, you know. But
well, I have a really cynical view of why Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it's not about one political party over the other. Um, it's strange to me that COVID hit, and so many thousand people died, and then all of a sudden the government decides, oh, we're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Like, just look at it outside of political parties. Like, we lost a lot of people. Those people no longer pay taxes. We need to replace them. So let's overturn Roe v. Wade. That's very skeptical and cynical of our political system. But, and I can't say that there's proof of correlation. It just makes sense to me that, how could Democrats allow this to happen? Like, well, it's not the Democrats or Republicans making the decisions. It's the people who, have the money and are lobbying for this, and that. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because I sound like a conspiracy theorist when I start going down that road. But if you pay attention to like the big banks and the bailouts and how like Bernie Sanders doesn't have a chance because he's speaking out against the big banks in Wall Street. Hillary says, it's not good, and then she'll give a speech at Goldman Sachs. So,
yeah, exactly. Well, I hadn't thought about that, but there was a runoff on the banks not long around the same time, I think, which, correlation and causation aren't always, but yeah, that's a good, I hadn't thought about that. It's, Bernie, and all he said once was like, he was talking to Joe Rogan. He said, all right, Joe, here's what I want to do. Number one, he said, let's just expand Medicaid. He's like, instead of, and he's like, it's not too radical. He's like, I just want to make it the way I can get eyeglasses, hearing aids, and get the teeth fixed. That's not very radical. And then I'm like, I'm down. I think it should be a right more than a privilege. Same with water. But at the same time, like when he talks about free college, I'm like, well, someone's going to foot the bill. Like fiscally, it don't make sense. But the Medicaid thing, I'm all for. But like you're exactly right. He's all these small donors that he take. Like I don't think he has super PACs or any PACs maybe. And the way the game, it's a game. If you don't have a super PAC behind you, you're just not going to win because it's about the money.
Why does it feel like we keep going back and forth? Like we have Republican president, Democratic president, Republican president, Democratic president, 4 years, 8 years, 8 years, 4 years. Like, why is it going back and forth? Because maybe the parties aren't as different as we try to pretend they are. Maybe there's, people with money that are pushing decisions to be made that benefit them, and that's how the cogs are being greased. But I don't know.
100%. Well, there's a great picture. It says it's got a blue donkey on the left, and there's a red elephant on the right. In the middle, it has a lamb, and I love it. It says, "My hope is in the lamb," and I'm like, because there is going to be a government. There's going to be a government. There's going to be a kingdom actually that's going to be coming. If you haven't heard of it in the comments, it's called the millennial reign. That's going to be the new government. And Jesus, that's. Can you imagine what that's going to be like, though, brother? Like in New Jerusalem, like that's just going to be awesome. To use there's probably a better word than awesome, but I agree with you. Like the left wing, the right wing, it's the same bird, really.
I don't know, and I'm not. People are going to hear what I'm saying and think I'm Democrat or I'm Republican. Like technically, I'm wretched Republican, but I do not agree with certain issues that at least the modern party is standing on. So it's not about that. It's just I'm really looking at things from a broader perspective, and I see trends and things.
Well, it's funny because where I grew up, there's no Republicans at all, and my mom and dad never really did politics, so I kind of thought that I did register Democrat because in my county I can't vote if I don't because there's no one on the Republican ticket, and I'm like, well, that doesn't seem fair. It kind of seems like gerrymandering to me, but and the way that they carve up these states and stuff. And when you look at it, there's certain states that give the advantage to one party or the other. And I'm just like, why don't we make it equal? If you know what I mean?
Right.
Like California used to be a red state, but now you don't really have a chance in California. Maybe Northern California, you can get a couple of red counties, but because Reagan was Republican, but that was then. This is now,
The Republican Party then too. There's a whole lot of things.
Yeah, it was different then. It wasn't a lot. There's some comparisons, but I don't think it's near. It's more radical, I think, today than it was. With some part, because there's two different camps. I feel like there's the MAGA camp, and then there's those traditional conservatives. and
Yeah.
they're always butting heads, you know.
Yeah. It is what it is. How do we get on this topic?
I don't know, but again, to bring it back to Christ, like He's coming. He's coming soon. Today's the day of salvation, and again, I don't know even where that. What is it? The 22nd, 23rd, whatever. People are saying, "Oh, the rapture's coming," and I'm like, I've been hearing that for my whole life, and I'm afraid. Well, I'm not afraid, but I think there was, and I'm not the only one that thinks this way. I've heard other people say this. If the rapture don't happen the way that they think that it's going to, a lot of people are going to get discouraged, and they're going to think, "Oh, I'm left behind." But Jim, even God, like Jesus, like that long suffering, that fruit of the Spirit, there's still people that can get saved and have salvation, even if they're not raptured. That's how great God is. Of course, you're still going to have to pass away, but you're going to have to be beheaded or however it's going to happen. If I'm reading Revelation correctly, because I could be wrong, but because I used to think that, like some guy asked me once, he's like, "Well, after the rapture, he's like, can you get saved?" And I had to search, and I'm still seeking, because it does talk about the martyrs, so I don't know. I think you can, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Please correct me.
Um, it depends on how you interpret. Not if you believe in the rapture, tribulation, millennium. It depends on how you interpret 2 Thessalonians 2, because some argue that the Holy Spirit is kind of taken out of the way, and that's the restrainer when the man of sin is revealed. So it's more difficult to be saved in the tribulation. That's what some people teach. And it's almost like kind of like how Israel was before the Holy Spirit was given, which if you take those two things together, it kind of makes sense that they would believe that. But I mean, that's essentially the view.
Okay, because I know there's like, I got one of those little like pocket size study things that just kind of touches at Revelation, and it mentions like there's 4 different schools of thought on, like, there's amillennialism, premillennial. Like some people think that he already came back, which I don't see. I don't see that as being biblical, but it is a school of thought.
Well,
But
there's the full preterist that believes that everything was fulfilled when Jerusalem was destroyed in the first century. Now, a majority of your amillennial and your postmillennial will say that, yes, Jerusalem was destroyed. That's basically the tribulation. The millennium is some period during the church age, and Christ will return to judge the living and the dead, the righteous and the wicked. I guess premillennial is like the other one, and then that's where you have your post, pre, and mid trib and all that. So make sure if someone says like Jesus returned in AD 70, like, well, is he going to come again and all that?
yeah, that was my question. I was like, well, I didn't get to ask because they brought me on the panel and they started just like not showing love like you're supposed to, but which I got up in my flesh too, if I'm being honest, because it just, I don't know, I didn't mean to, but it can happen sometimes. But I was like, so if he came back in 70 AD after what, 40, like I guess 30 AD ish, so that's when he was crucified. I'm like, he came back 40 years later, and he's coming back again. Wouldn't that be a third coming? And they're like, no, you're reading it wrong. And I'm like, just show me where Christ came back in 70 AD. And they're like, they didn't really have any answers, and I was like, well, if that's what the Bible says, like let God be true, every man a liar. But if the Bible's not saying that, you're just putting your doctrine into it, you know?
Right. And I don't I don't think they should say like Christ came back or returned in 70 AD. I think there is a judgment that's poured out on Jerusalem. That's like what Matthew 23 and Matthew 24 is kind of talking about. And I think, like we were talking about earlier, like that's where the signs come into play, like wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and that sort of thing. Like that's what the signs are pointing to. And Jesus says this generation won't pass away. In the Jewish mind, the generation is 40 years. It's the 40 years that they spent in the wilderness where one generation died off. So that's why the signs are there for the judgment on Jerusalem, but coming as a thief in the night is Christ's second advent. Like the Greek word is like epiphaneia, like epiphany, like his appearing, his coming. And I don't think that word is used to describe the destruction of Jerusalem or that particular.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense because, okay. So would you say that, I think it's Daniel 9:26 or Daniel 9:27 rather. I mean, if you have the time, we could discuss it. If not, I know.
I've got about 20 minutes, so I'm good. This can be
'Cause I know
short.
when I read Daniel 9, when he talks about his 70 weeks, like there's a checklist there. And like when Christ came, well, I'll just go to it right quick if you want to turn there because
I've got it.
I go to, okay. I think it starts in verse, we'll see,
24.
24. So, like, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, which is Jerusalem,
Right.
to finish the So, this is the checklist. So, and then we just have to ask, did Jesus check all these boxes? To finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. But then when I go to, 9:27, I'm like, well, I don't think that part's been fulfilled. Like the covenant, there was the new covenant with Christ, but in 27, I think that's talking about a different covenant that's not Jesus. If you want to,
Well, that's the big debate is the covenant that was made that brought an end to all these things. Is that Jesus partway through the last week, or is that a week that has yet to be fulfilled and it's some other character making the covenant? Like that's the divide. Because
okay,
some will say verse 24, well, Jesus did all that by Calvary. Others will say, well, sin's still in the world, so it hasn't ended yet. But we can see how he, made an end to sin, and you'd argue he sealed up vision and prophecy and all those things. So let's slow down and take verse 25 because we got time to do that. Verse 25 is that know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, that's shortly after King Cyrus said, go back, rebuild Jerusalem. That's when the 70 weeks start. So you have actually 3 different waves of people coming back into Jerusalem. And if you start from when Ezra comes and he reads the law to the people, then the 70 weeks ends like 3.5 years after the crucifixion. But if you go by like the date that Cyrus gave the decree before the people actually went back, then it's a little hazy. But and it's not necessarily exact. Like the middle of the week doesn't have to be 3.5 years exactly, but where are we at? To restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublesome times. So that's just Zechariah and not Zechariah, Zerubbabel and them rebuilding Jerusalem at the beginning of the 70 weeks. After 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Till the end of the war, desolations are determined. This is what throws people off is if this is 70 AD, that's actually shortly after the end of the 70 weeks. Because we're counting the 70 weeks, we come short of like AD 30 or 33 or something like that. So the people of the prince, again, if that's 70 AD, then it's just shortly outside of that. So it's not necessarily within the 70 weeks. And that throws a lot of people off. Then verse 27 says, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. And people say, is that the prince that's destroying Jerusalem, or is this the Messiah making the covenant? And that's the big debate. But in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall the one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. If you read Matthew 23, and Jesus says, not one stone will be left on the other, your house is left unto you desolate. And he says, this generation won't pass away till all these things take place in 24:34. Because it makes a distinction between the one making the covenant and the one that's bringing the abomination. I think.
Right.
But
and then there was who's the dude? Antioch the fourth that sacrificed the sow on the altar. So you have that as, was that the time that he walked into the Holy of Holies, or was that a precursor?
I think
when you study that, yeah.
I don't think that's referenced in this 70 week, but a lot of the passage that people allude to as far as the Antichrist and Daniel are talking about Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth. They called him Antiochus. Epimenet. They called him something else. His name's Epiphanes. They called him something else, and it means madman because he was just evil and all that stuff. But yeah, he did bring a sow on the altar. Something similar would be happening, which Jesus talks about in Matthew 24. Like you're going to see something similar to the abomination of desolation. He doesn't say it in those terms, but the abomination of desolation, Daniel, is the sow being offered on the altar and the persecution of the Jewish people at that time by this Greek leader.
And I wonder too, because I don't know the exact, because I know Titus, destroyed it there in 70 AD. They did rebuild it right after.
No.
But so it's not been rebuilt since then.
Like Jerusalem as a city has been rebuilt. Now people argue about the Wailing Wall. Like there's a section of like the outer wall outside the temple that's still standing. That's where Jews will go to pray, and tourists will come. They'll put on their yarmulke and they'll pray there. Like Donald Trump did that right after he became president, I think.
Okay.
So there's
put a mosque.
Go ahead.
Okay, they put a mosque there over the Temple Mount. Like that's what's there right now is a mosque, right?
No,
I think.
I'm not 100% sure about that. I think that's what people say, but I don't think it's the same location. Because I've always heard that there is a mosque there that it has to be destroyed before the temple is rebuilt, if they do rebuild a temple. I'm not 100% sure on the geography there, because I've heard different things recently. That, one, it's not even a mosque. It's some sort of altar or memorial. Like, it's not a legitimate mosque. It's called the Dome of the Rock. I've heard people call it a mosque all my life. I don't think that's actually technically accurate.
Right. Because the more I research it, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just not 100% sure on all those details because.
Well, I'm not either. That's why I wanted to ask you, because I know I've heard some, people say, which it's interesting, because in Revelation, toward the end, it talks about 12 gates. And I think the gates may be there right now, but it's 12, because there was 12 like tribes of Ishmael or anyway. But I'm like, okay, because my understanding was if they're, if this third temple does get built or whatever, because they got the red heifers and whatnot there, like, are they going to have to physically build a temple, or can they just have the altar? Because I'd heard that my whole life. And I was like, where are they getting this from? And then I had to go read when it says, rebuilding Jerusalem. here in Daniel, because it says they will restore, and and they did, like you said, they rebuilt Jerusalem, but the temple on the mount that they destroyed, I was like, well, that part's still not. It's in Muslim control right now, right? I think the Jews can only have access to the Western Wall, maybe the Wailing Wall. I don't know, 100%.
Um, but the rebuilding in Daniel 9 is the rebuilding of the second temple, because that's what kind of kicks off and starts. That's within the 70-week period, the 490-year period.
Oh, that makes sense. So the second temple was rebuilt. Okay, but it was then destroyed after it was rebuilt.
Correct.
Yeah.
They called it Herod's temple because Herod donated a lot of money and got gold and stuff covering it. It still wasn't anything compared to what it was the first temple was when Solomon built it. But Daniel's writing in Babylonian captivity. He says after 70 years of captivity, there's going to be this decree. They're going to return. They're going to build it. And that's what is it Ezra and Nehemiah are talking about, because you have Zerubbabel as the descendant of Judah who's kind of taking charge of the people at that time. You've got prophets like Haggai and Zechariah. This is the part of the Old Testament that I think we know the least about, because Daniel's old. He's lived through 70 years of captivity, but that's going to come to an end. They're going to go back, rebuild the temple. The temple, Nehemiah rebuilds the wall, and then Ezra brings the law to the people, because living in Babylon for so long, many of them had neglected it. They didn't even speak the Hebrew language anymore. Most of them didn't. So that whole restoration of, bringing us back from captivity is one of the most, I think, ignored parts of Old Testament history.
But that's interesting, because when you look at the 70 weeks, you think of, because I was reading Daniel, and somehow I got on Jeremiah. I found like a cross reference, and he was in captivity as well. I think 70 years. Well, maybe he references the 70 years, maybe, because I was trying to read up on Jeremiah, like what little I could, and I was like, I couldn't remember if he was in exile or not at that time when he was writing it.
Yeah, because Jeremiah tells the people, Jeremiah and Ezekiel are before the captivity. They're warning people, Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. And prophets had said that before, like Micah and all them. And Jeremiah is the one that gives them the length of the captivity. It's going to be 70 years. At the beginning of Daniel 9, Daniel's saying, he's reading Jeremiah. He says, oh, this captivity is going to come to a close shortly. Like, he didn't realize it was only going to be 70 years. And that's when he prays, and he wants to know, what's going to happen thereafter. And that's when the prophecy of the 70 weeks is given by the angel. So Jeremiah and Ezekiel are living in Jerusalem. I want to say that right. Just prior to it being destroyed the first time, like the first temple being destroyed, and most of Jerusalem, 1/3 goes to the sword, 1/3 goes out scattered in the wilderness, and then 1/3 is taken into captivity. That 1/3 comes up in Ezekiel throughout. So they're warning the people, you need to repent, you need to do this, do not fight against Babylon when they come. They're going to carry you into captivity because of the wickedness of Manasseh and the people, Manasseh who led the people into idolatry, and all these kings and people that have done wickedness. So the land's going to be at rest for 70 years.
Well, that's interesting, because there's also 1/3 of Israel. There's going to be a remnant, right? That's I forget where it's at. Maybe Isaiah in the end times, I think, where they're going to be saved. Like when Jesus tells them, he's like, don't go and get your stuff, run, don't go. So, and I can't remember, but Aunt Vicky was, doing a study on it, but she was talking about the 1/3, because it specifically tells you 2/3 of Israel are going to be destroyed, but then it says 1/3, and I was wondering, has that happened? Because it kind of has happened, but then God always leaves a remnant. And I'm thinking, And then with Zechariah, I'm all over the place, I'm sorry.
Oh,
have
you're
you
fine.
noticed, like, when I was reading Revelation, I I got some cross references with Zechariah, and like there's the four horsemen, but in Zechariah there's chariots, but the horse colors are very similar, and I'm like, I don't know what there was to that because Zechariah talks about uh, horses carrying the chariots, and I know it's like symbolic and whatnot, but
Right.
I was like, the correlation with that and the revelation that Jesus gave to John, I was like, this is above my pay grade, but God showed me this for a reason.
Yeah, like I said, Haggai and Zechariah are prophets when the second temple's being constructed. Because Haggai's the prophet who says, you're filling all your money in a bag full of holes because you're trying to build up your own houses and do your own thing, and the temple of God is being neglected. You're not giving what you can to help rebuild it. And by the conclusion of Haggai, I think it's the people are stirred up and it is rebuilt. And the people who saw the previous, wept because it had nothing to do with the former glory, but everyone else was pretty much happy, like, oh, the temple's rebuilt. And then Zechariah has that all that apocalyptic imagery, and by apocalyptic, I don't mean end of the world. Apocalyptic is just highly symbolic language that speaks of some kind of judgment or some kind of. It depends on what we're talking about as to what it's actually referring to.
Okay, because I think I might be wrong on this, but I think I was reading the Greek Revelation means apocalypos,
Yeah,
but it's like a lifting of the veil is what it means, right? So it's like some things are being revealed, and I don't know. I did think about this if there was any significance of it. You know how like the Christ is the bride, or the church is the bride rather. He's the bridegroom, and I was like, when there's the wedding, you lift the veil of the bride, and I was like, apocalypse lifting the veil. I was like, I wonder. I don't know because nothing's arbitrary with God. Like all the word, like you know what I mean. It's just like I thought that was kind of interesting. Um, yeah, I don't know what this person, this troll, is doing in the chat. So I'm glad you muted him.
all
I
right.
hear that argument a lot. So they're like, why does like the flood? Why would God do the flood? And then some guy mentioned the mustache man. He's why didn't he do anything with the mustache man? And I'm like, well, if he did, you would still gripe about it. Like
God doesn't get credit for the planes that don't crash.
exactly. Oh boy.
All right, I've got to get
But
going.
Gene, it's always a pleasure, sir.
Absolutely.
God bless you.
All right, thanks for the conversation. We'll catch up sometime, Lord willing.
Yeah, Lord willing, and maybe if I come to Ohio, we can have some coffee or whatever, tea or what's. Are you a sweet tea drinker?
I don't drink tea. I don't drink coffee. I had a frappe this morning, so I'm caffeinated and ready to preach this morning.
I have a frappe with you. Are you going on your YouTube or where are you preaching?
I know I'm preaching at a small church in Ohio. It's the Bidwell Church of Christ.
Oh, okay. I was going to say if you were streaming it, I'd like to check it out. But all right then.
No, sorry, I my tripod broke. Like I had a little like stand I could record my sermons on. It ended up breaking because it was like a $5 thing. I bought at Five Below. I'm gonna invest in a better tripod so I can record my sermons and post them later on YouTube. So that is coming. It's gonna be a few weeks.
All right. Yeah. And is that link to your YouTube channel on your TikTok?
On the profile, yeah. So I've got my Roman sermons there too. Not all of them because I started recording at like chapter 5 for whatever reason, and then like I said, when I did chapter 11 or 12, I think that broke. But I've got those.
Okay.
I've got a sermon playlist, and I want to do some more with that. And I've got some good live discussions. Do you care if I post this discussion on? Because I really appreciate the conversation.
No, by all means, yeah. You have my permission. Yeah, I don't care.
Okay. I normally don't ask, and I probably should. So I apologize for.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, if I see it on there, I'll be like, "Hey, that's me. I'm famous. I'm viral."
Yeah.
But yeah, man, have a great sermon and God bless you. And maybe if I do get to come to Ohio, we can have a frappe and just meet up in person. So
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Everyone else, have a good day. God bless. We'll catch you later.